All right, so when we're taking a look at the pelvis, okay, the pelvis itself is made up of 3 bones. You have the os coxae, which are half of your hip bones. That's what this bone is here. Okay, so this is your os coxae, one here, one here. You'll notice they're separated by cartilage. We then have the sacrum and the coccyx. Remember, the sacrum and the coccyx are part of the vertebrae, so we're not going to talk about them now, but I do want to talk about the hip bone. So when we talk about the pelvic girdle, the hip joint, this is the os coxae bone. Okay, so this is looking from a lateral view. This is looking from a medial view. So when we're talking about lateral is looking this way, medial is looking from the inside out. Okay, so when we're looking at these, the very top of it is going to be the ilium. So that's the first part of that os coxae, is the ilium. We then have 2 parts. We have more of a rounded part and we have more of a pointed part. The rounded part is your ischium, and the pointed part is the pubic bone, also known as the pubis. So the proper term is pubis. You guys are probably familiar with your pubic bone. So the way to remember that, okay, is when I'm looking at it this way, is this large part, when you put your hand on your hip, you're putting it on the ilium. When you sit on your ischium, which is why you kind of want it to be a little more rounded. And your pubic bone, well, you never ever talk to your teachers about your pubis. So ilium, ischium, pubis. Okay, so when looking at, this is a male pelvis, ilium, ischium, pubis, ilium, ischium, pubis. Even if you turn it and you look at it the lateral view, you're going to know this is the ilium. The more rounded, once again, is going to be the ischium. The more pointed is the pubis. So when you're taking a look at these os coxae, there's a couple of things, a couple of structures that you need to know. So whenever you look at, I'll grab this one here and this one here, we're looking at it from this direction. They're both the same way. On the hip, the pelvic girdle is made up of that os coxae with the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. But you'll notice that socket. That socket is called the acetabulum. The easiest way to remember that is it's close to your ass. The other thing that you'll notice is you'll notice these large holes, right? So these large holes in these bones, this is called the obturator foramen. Foramen meaning large, obturator is just the specific hole that we're referring to. So on the pelvis, when you're looking at these holes in the front, okay, those are all the obturator foramens. These guys here, the sockets of the ball and socket joints, which you see here, and when we're looking at it here, that's the acetabulum. So let's talk about the ilium first. So the ilium, remember, refers to the top. So how can you kind of tell front and back when you're looking at an individual bone? So where the sacrum sits, you'll kind of notice has this kind of jaggedy, it's not flat, it's not a surface that's flat. That is where the sacrum's gonna fit. So this is really the front aspect, kind of the medial aspect looking out. And then on the back, you'll notice that this is a lot smoother, okay? So this is the front, this is the back. So that front portion's gonna have kind of that area that's a little smoother. Also the pubic bone, remember, is gonna be toward the front. So it's going to be sitting like this. This is the front. So this is the front here. So when you're looking at the ilium, the first thing I want you guys to notice is we have the iliac crest. So the crest is basically just the top of that hip, the top line here. Okay. But we also have an anterior superior iliac spine and a posterior superior iliac spine. So let's talk about anterior first. So anterior is referring to the front of the bone. So remember, you have your sacrum here. This is that area here. So this is the front. So this anterior superior refers to the fact that it's anterior, but it's also above. So this area right here is that anterior superior iliac spine. Okay, and if you ever kind of hit your hip, if you run into something with your side, you're usually hitting that anterior superior iliac spine. If you flip it over, okay, now we're looking at the back side. Remember, this is the front, this is over here was our superior, and down here is going to be our back. So this bump here is that posterior superior iliac spine. It's on the back, but it's also above. So you can see this bump is on the back. This one here is on the front. So that's the anterior here. The anterior is a little bit smaller than the posterior. Both of them are superior iliac spines. Okay, once again, this is the crust. So if we're looking at our full pelvis again, so what we're looking at, this is front, this is going to be back. So our anterior superior iliac spine is here. Our posterior is back here. Okay, same thing on this one. Anterior superior iliac spine is here. On the back, it's going to be here. And they look a little different on each one of the models. Okay, so posterior back here, anterior superior iliac spine is there. And once again, up here is going to be that iliac crest. So the other thing that we're also going to see is we're going to see a greater sciatic notch. And so on this thing, when we look at it on the side, you're going to notice this is looking from the back end, this is looking from the front. This area right here is that greater sciatic notch. Looking at the full pelvis, looking at it kind of at the side view, that is that greater sciatic notch. So this thing here is greater sciatic notch. On this one here, this large hole here is the greater sciatic notch. So once again, we're kind of looking at it from the side. So this is front, this is back, this is the sacrum. So back here is going to be that greater sciatic notch. You can also see it from the side, looking into the pelvis. So where my finger is right there. The next bone is that pubic bone. Remember on this guy, so when we're looking at this, remember, this is going to be the front. So this is the pubis here. It's going to be quite a bit more pointed than the ischium. So this pubis here, where the two pubic bones, those pubises are coming together, we have the pubic symphysis. So that cartilage in between on both of these is that pubic symphysis. These are the pubic bones. The next thing we're going to look at is the pubic tubercle. So these areas right here, these kind of upper regions are the pubic tubercles. Same thing on this one here. When you're looking at half of it, the most superior portion is the pubic tubercle. And then the pubic arch you can only see, just like the pubic symphysis, you can only see when the pelvis is together. So the pubic arch here is the space between these pubic bones. So you can see this one's a little more narrow and this one is a little bit wider, and that's the difference between male and female. The last bone that we're going to be looking at is the ischium. So the ischium is, remember, this rounded region here. So the more rounded bone is your ischium. So when you're looking at this is the ischium here. So when you look at the ischial tuberosity, you're looking at that bump here. Same thing on here, you're looking for that bump. That's the ischial tuberosity. On this one here, that rounded projection, we're looking at the tuberosity. So that's the ischial tuberosity. So I'm going to continue with the half. Remember, pubis here, ischium here. So ischial, or the ischial tuberosity. The other thing that you're going to see on the ischium, kind of as you kind of look toward the back, remember this is where our posterior superior iliac spine is. This is our greater sciatic notch. Our greater sciatic notch is going to continue down to this projected area here, which is known as the ischial spine. So this one here is the ischial spine. If you look on the full pelvis, find that greater sciatic notch. That pointed area kind of at the base of that is that ischial spine. Same thing on this one, it's a little more noticeable. Here's your greater sciatic notch, here's your ischial spine. Right below the ischial spine is your lesser sciatic notch. So you notice how this is a bigger indentation and this is a little smaller indentation. Greater sciatic notch, lesser sciatic notch, in between is your ischial spine. So same thing on this one, greater sciatic notch, ischial spine, here's your lesser sciatic notch. On the half pelvis again, greater sciatic notch, ischial spine, lesser sciatic notch. The other thing that I kind of want to focus on now is the difference between male and female pelvis. So when we look at the male and the female pelvis, first thing I want you guys to notice, this is the female. The ilia are going to flare a lot more. The pelvic bones are going to be shorter themselves. So if we kind of put these side by side, the pelvis in terms of depth of these bones is going to be smaller on the female than it is on the male. When we look at this, just adjust a little bit here. So as we look at these, you're going to notice that the hole is much larger in the female pelvis. So the male pelvis is in front, the female pelvis in the back. If you look at the outlet, which is this lower portion down here, you'll notice this one kind of looks like a heart, whereas the female looks a little more round and actually looks a little bit like Mickey Mouse head, right? So you see the two ears, one ear is where my fingers are, and then the head. So that kind of looks a little bit more like Mickey Mouse. So big thing here is women are adapted to bear children. So when we look at the pubic arch also, you'll notice that the arch here is much narrower in the male and much wider in the female. So the area here is a lot wider, here it's a lot narrower. The other thing that you're going to notice, if you look at the acetabulum, look at the size of the sockets. The socket on the female is much smaller, And the reason it's much smaller is because women usually have less muscle, so their bones are going to be thinner and not as large. And so men with that more skeletal muscle are going to have larger bones, so that socket's going to be larger on them, where it's going to be smaller in the female. The other thing that you're going to see when you look at the pelvis from kind of a side view is if you look at the sacrum and the coccyx, yes, the coccyx kind of curves, but if you notice it, it's got some space here, right? You've got some good space that you can see. On the male, though, notice how the coccyx is curving a lot more forward, so there's a lot less space here. Okay. The other thing on this is the sacrum of the female is usually going to be shorter and wider. On the male, the sacrum is going to be longer and narrower. And then the last thing I want to look at are these ischial spines. So now you can actually see those ischial spines here on the inside of the pelvis here. So if you look at the tips of my fingertips that are moving, there's a lot of space between that in the female. In the male, that space is much shorter. So you kind of see I'm going from my second bend of one finger to the second bend of another, where this one here, it's almost the entire length of both fingers. So that space in between those ischial spines here is a lot greater in the female.